Hi, I'm Rob. I make it better. That's what I do. Maybe you did read that book of Daniel Cole back in 2008, The Talent Code. That either you change, and maybe you can build talent, or you still keep no. If you're talented, it's just how it is. You can't change that. And the word talent is basically used by people who doesn't know what they're talking about. Talent is, well, let's start with the definition here, nothing else than a skill or a skill set with a defined context. That's all it is. It's a skill set. What Daniel did in the book is talking about deep practice. Doesn't mean anything really, because he didn't understand what was going on. He visited a few people around the world. If you speak or singing in America, for example, they send you to one lady. She was basically educating every singer in America. Just to understand, just by talking, you have to coordinate around 100 muscles. Your vocal cord in your throat, and all that stuff with breathing. All that is easy, right? You wouldn't call that a talent. No, it's a skill. Talk to your baby. And you go, hello, baby, what's your name? And the baby go, wow. Or they won't speak at all. They just look at you and go, what's going on? Because they won't understand what you're saying. Even speaking and listening to what people say is a skill. It's not a talent. Well, I'm talented because I can talk. You wouldn't say that. That would be silly. So, Daniel, when he visited a lot of people around the world who were good at the stuff, there was a tennis lady. She was very old at the time. I don't know if she's still alive. But basically, she was teaching everybody who became a tennis pro from Russia at the time. Why? Well, they create a phenomena that people don't understand. For example, in psychology, they talk about the unconscious mind. It doesn't exist. It's not real. But it seems like that. Santa Claus seems real too. James Bond, ooh, must be real. They make movies of him, all the time. Must be a real spy, right? Freud and Jung didn't know what they were doing, so they created a concept, but it doesn't apply to human consciousness. Pretty much like talent. What are you going to do now? Well, people then build theories and concepts from that when the foundation itself is not really good. It becomes guesswork. So something very simple and straightforward is that everything that you do, thinking, emotions, activity, like that, all are skill specific. And people go, oh, I don't think so. Well, you can tell your hand to make a fist, and it won't do that until you engage something to do that. Once you do that, you go, how did I do just that? You can go ask people in the earth, they don't know. They just know you can do it, but they don't really, well, there's an electrical signal, chemical response, all that. Yeah, but how does it work? If you look at people with cerebral palsy, they have a muscle group that they can't move their hand, for example, they're born with it. The interesting thing is the wiring from the muscles up to the brain and back, there's nothing wrong with that. But the mechanism in the brain to send the signal out doesn't work. Now, interesting enough, you can go to a place in Hungary and some other places there called the pedagogy. They have a lot of people. What they do there is for 10 hours a day for 2 weeks in straight, and they do a program for 6 months or something like that. It's very labor intensive. They move the thumb or such or finger in a specific movement with people, right? Like this. For about, repeat the motion as precisely as possible. And it's very painful for them because if usually what happens is that when the muscles doesn't want to move because they have cerebral palsy, it's painful. Anyway, the program works. So you can actually learn to take control of your muscles because if something tickles the brain and go, what's that out in the periphery? Oh, I can now start moving my thumb. But if you go to a normal doctor in your country, they will tell you, well, you have cerebral palsy. you're fucked. So much for doctors and experts, right? But it costs a lot of money, so you can tell them, I want to go to there and do the program, and they will tell you, well, you can't because it costs too much money. Well, maybe I can, manage myself, and handle my own apartment or house or something like that. No, you can't do that. It costs too much money. Kind of silly. Anyway, talent. Oh yeah. So you may think people are talented when they actually have a skill or a skill set within that context. A few years back, a couple of years ago, I was looking into Sandra Naslund. She's a skier in ski cross. That means that 4 ladies, they start at the same time, and they have a little beep signal, do beep, and then they're all 4 at the same time start to ski. Now she always got a half a meter to 1 meter ahead of all the ladies. And I looked at this clip where she was an Olympic gold and she won like 25 events in a row, something like that. Really good skier from Sweden. And I looked at that for a couple of minutes because I was kind of curious. And I looked at it and I was thinking, oh yeah, that's what she's doing. I could identify, right? Because I can look at what she was doing versus the other ladies, and they couldn't do it, and they didn't do it. Here's the funny thing. Any national coach from Switzerland, Germany, and such, France, whatever they might be from, have the same information as me, the same clip, but they can't analyze what Sandra is doing and teach it to the ladies that they coach. I can. I just look at 2 minutes. Okay, that's what she's doing. Okay, I can teach it now. It's not that difficult. Well, unless you're not me, of course. Then it's very difficult. So people will say to me, maybe you're talented, Rob. No, it's just a skill set I developed over the years. So how does this all work? What is skill set people use? Well, there is no real definition of it out there in psychology because it's all unconscious. And if it's all unconscious, well, you don't know. But this is specific in the context. Because you don't do this. I'm just going to grab my jaw like this. You don't do this. And you go at your hand and go, what the fuck is going on with your hand? You don't do that. It's specific for the context. Thinking, emotional activities you do are specific to context. That means in your head there is a contextual memory, which is a reality for people, and that means that you interact with people in the environment that's a different context. But if you use the model and conceptual model of psychology with the unconscious mind, you can't, which doesn't apply to human consciousness at all. People, oh, it must be unconscious. No, it's not. It's contextual. Think about it. When I see that fucking cat, I get so fucking mad. Okay, so what happens when you don't see it? Oh, I'm not mad. But when I see the cat, I'm unconsciously reacting to the cat, or the dog, or that fucking asshole. It's not unconscious, it's specific to the context. Formula, context specific. It's not unconscious response. You don't see a snake, boom, fine. See a snake, right? Context specific. And people call it a phobia because they don't know what it is. They think, oh, it must be an unconscious response. No, it's not unconscious, it's very context specific. If you remove the memory in your head, you won't have a phobia, technically. It's very hard to remove memories. You can do it, technically, it's surgery, address the area that you have the memory and then wipe it out. Which I won't recommend. That would be bad for most people. Is this the place where the memory? And you go, well, I still remember that, but I forgot everything else. That would be fun. Neat. So, what people then do is to use the model and conceptual model that people have been using for generations is the unconscious mind, right? Doesn't work, doesn't apply. Therapists, for example, what they usually end up talking about is, my life is shit, right? You go into the therapist and they're gonna say, when you say that, what's going on? Well, my life is shit. And they're gonna usually say, well, what do you think? How do you feel about that? What kind of question is that? I would ask. And they go, well, because my life is already shit. Why do you want to know how I feel about that? It's kind of obvious, right? Well, how do you think about that? You see, this kind of reflective question they ask because they don't understand that everything is context specific. I actually worked with someone who had been in therapy for 17 years. Not 5, not 10, not 15, 17. And the problem was the same. And it took me 2 minutes to figure that out because it was context specific. It's very funny things of people in therapy. They don't know what to do. And that client had been through every therapist in town. It's like, I don't know how many there are in a town with 100,000 people. And some of them even, told, you have to stop seeing me because you don't have a problem. And they had a problem. It's just that people are kind of incompetent in therapy because of the unconscious mind. Okay, so how does this skill thing work? It's called feedback. Deep practice is nothing else than feedback. Think about it. You're going to play violin. Now you have to press with your fingers on those kind of strings in a particular way, right? But it's not just putting the fingers there and do that. You have to also use the proper pressure to get the sound with all this stuff. It's very fine-tuned coordination. So you can tell people that, okay, you're going to use 2 grams of pressure there, 5 grams there, 3 grams there, and your brain's going to go, what? You can't do that. A lot of people try to, teach like that or instruct like that. So what you have to do is then to understand how it's supposed to be, sound like. So you take maybe a piece of the music that's really difficult to do, and you're trying to master that, and you have to practice that. And here's the thing: when you do practice, you have to make the distinction of when it is supposed to sound the way it's supposed to, versus when it's not supposed to sound. When you make that distinction, that's how it's supposed to sound, that's not. That distinction of difference is a comparison you do to make a distinction of difference in that context, playing the violin. That's what deep practice is. But they can't explain that Daniel Cole didn't know this, and he still doesn't know that 17 years later. Because once you know that, if you go to my other YouTube channel, which I have about overcoming dyslexia, my approach always works. So if you're a parent with a dyslexic kid, you watch these videos, apply the instruction, pay attention. All you do is teach your kid to be with distinction of difference feedback. You spell cat, and you out loud, and they go CAT, and you say, was that correct or not? You ask them, and your kid go, yeah, that was good. And you say, good, that was. Spell it backward, and they go TAC. Now you hear the word T, the letter T, and it's a really bit of a duration before they go to AC backwards. What it's supposed to sound like is TACACAT, and you need to know that it's correct spelled cat. TACACAT. That's how people can spell it normally when you can read. So what you're gonna learn when you adjust all this stuff for your kid is that you're building a memory reference in how the word's supposed to look like when you read. And usually after 3 to 5 words, and they can take, depending on your kid's, kind of issue, it doesn't matter, what's going on. If you're lucky, your kid have an organization issue only. They're dyslexic, but they have everything they need to be able to do this, but it's not organized properly. My approach will work because it's built on, pay attention, how people actually fucking read. And people go, why don't you ask the professor with tenure who write books about dyslexia and ask them the question, how do you understand what you're reading? They can't answer you. They don't know. They don't understand how people read. What they only really can do is to diagnose your kid, and they can't do much more. So, technically speaking, they know what's wrong with your kid. So now you only need to do reversals, right? Can't do that because they don't understand how people read. I do. My approach always works. It can't fail. Now, the other case of when people have dyslexia is that when they have a function that's not working properly, you now have to build with repetition and feedback, repetition and feedback, repetition and feedback, repetition and feedback, the memory function for the skill to put the word cat the way it's supposed to, or another word the way it's supposed to, until they can do it. But here's the funny thing about the brain. Once the brain understands how to do something, and you build the skill set, dyslexia disappears. Because the brain now and then, your kid start to update themselves in how things are supposed to look like when they read things. Yeah. I had parents that work with the kid, and then I had the parent, talking to the kid, what are you doing? And the kid go, I'm reading, Mom. And the mom look at, what? I mean, after 5 years, they tried everything, right? Every expert in the field, no help. Then they come to me, I'm doing some things, and they can read. And then they look at me, the parents look at me and go, and they never ask, how did you just do that, what you did? Because they were in the room with me. They were like, how the fuck does that? And the kid doesn't know how he or she, they can just read now. It's a skill. People will say, well, maybe their unconscious got smart. Right. Out of the nowhere, when I'm working with them, not so much. It's a skill. And it's technology that overcomes dyslexia that actually fucking works. It can't fail. Because once you teach your kid the distinction or difference when they spell a word correctly or not, and they build their own self-reference to how a word's supposed to look like and spell like, at some point the brain goes, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. And language changes over time. In Sweden here, for example, we have a word for iron, right? Järn. And it's spelled with a letter Ä. But 120 years ago, it was spelled with the letter E. So if you go look at old pictures from 100 years ago, iron stores also was supply, and it was spelled with järn. And now it's järn. Yen or järn. It's a difference there. And the way the language operates and changes over time is when people are describing new things, make new distinction or difference, and compare. So they can make, once you compare enough, you can go to, oh, and then you get it. You get that distinction or difference, and then you know. Now you build the memory. It's not unconscious. Everything you do is conscious, contextually speaking. So reality is what you use in your contextual memory. This is why people are fact resistant, right? Because if the new information doesn't fit what's inside your head already, people say, well, climate change is natural. But the humans are doing and adding to the atmosphere, it's not natural, by the way. It's never happened before. But then people say, it's not just natural. I say, can you make soup? And they go, yeah. Make the soup, and I just take salt, which is natural, and I just start pouring salt into the soup. Now, it doesn't take long for them to say, stop pouring salt in my soup. And I say, why? It's natural. Well, I can't eat that because it will just be salt, taste, it'll be, and it's natural. That's what humans are doing to that. We're adding things, and we can't really predict what's going to happen. This is why, read reports you hear about flooding. There was, various places in the world. Oh, it's going to be some rain and blah, blah, blah. No warnings. And just before the shit is going to hit the fan, the weather reports go like, what the fuck is happening? There comes 10 times or 100 times as much rain as the models they have developed over the years can't predict. That's why people die. Because of climate changes. It changes how people predict models of weather and other things. So talent is just a buzzword people use, doesn't know. Anything anyone does, including yourself, like talking, singing, playing the violin, doing other things, are based on skill set that is contextual. What I do in my kind of line of work, what I did, is to look at people who do things differently and really well, and extract what they're doing and package it into the skill set, and then give them drills or exercises to gain those skills so they can do the same thing. That's what I do. It's kind of cold weather today. Winter is coming here. Today we had kind of windy, a little bit cold. It's like, I don't know, 10 Celsius. Leaves on the trees start to get yellow and dropping off. Still no snow, lucky enough, but it will come at some point. But people use, this kind of stuff. They think unconscious mind is real because people have been talking about it and teaching it for 100 years, give or take. And the resistance to all the new things, which I, usually do, is met with resistance because people doesn't have a memory of the information I offer them. This is why I don't talk a lot about golf swing mechanics on YouTube here. It's a waste of time because people won't understand it anyway. I mean, I have people coming, every 2 pro is using the modern golf grip. Yeah, that's why they're stuck. The reason why you do the drills without the club in your hand first and foremost, and then with a club, is because if you try to hit the ball, what do you think is going to happen? Remember the tennis lady in the talent code book? She gave the kid, 7 years old, racket and told them to run and do some things with the racket in specific ways, but they didn't hit any balls. Because here's what your brain is going to do when you have learned a golf swing. As soon as you look down and your brain sees the ball, it's going to engage the old circuit with the old swing, and your old swings suck. I don't know who you are, if you're a 2 pro or not, but if you're a 2 pro, your golf swings suck. And if you're an amateur, if the 2 pro swings suck, what do you think yours do? They suck even worse. Sucky. Is that a vampire thing? I don't know, maybe. Because as soon as you look down, your brain go contextual reference golf ball. And you can't change if you do hit balls, if you do the new drills. You're not supposed to. Because you have to isolate the motion, the movement first, before you start hitting golf balls. And once you struggle with that, you go back doing them without the golf ball again. Distinction of difference. You have to identify the distinction of difference with the context. Basically, you have to learn to ignore the ball. This is why, I was, on and off if I wanted to publish the best drill in the world of golf, which is the relax and turn. Because you have to shift your grip, and you also have to do this without, hitting balls first. And you have to exaggerate so you build a difference of distinction. Of difference you can compare properly. If you don't do that, you're gonna struggle, be frustrated and all that stuff. Because you want to keep your modern golf grip, it's suck ass. You're stuck, they teach you to suck. You also understand how bad modern golf is. They can't teach you to how to aim properly. If you look at 2 pros and yourself, because you're gonna apply with people, how many times do they need to look left before they swing or make a putt? If you know how to aim, you don't need to do that. 2 pros can't aim. It's very funny. So the best golf coaches, the golf gurus, blah, 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 so-called best, like Pete Cavan, Henk Anderson, Foley, people, that taught famous golfers, right? They don't know how to teach you how to aim. Putting gurus can't teach you to aim. And actually, what putting gurus do is to fuck you up. They can't teach you to aim in putting, and the second thing what happens is they can't teach you to have distance control naturally. What they're actually doing is causing a big fuck up from the get-go when they teach you putting. They don't know that. They're just ignorant and incompetent, if you ask me. They can't teach you. They teach you shit. That's a problem, I think, if you're a 2 pro. If you can't aim naturally, and if you can't have distance control naturally, you're probably going to end up like Anne Van Dam, who has like 31 putts. That means that if she plays today a tournament, she has 6 shots to make up for putting. And if you play against really good players, you're just fucked. They have 28 putts around, you have 31. You don't stand a chance. You need to fix that. But the problem is the putting gurus can't fix it. Because they're going to give you bullshit things that you have to work on. It will never really work. And that's, most people never pay attention to that. When I teach things, people get to the point, it doesn't matter if it's golf or some other stuff, they get to a point where they can just do it. When I work with dyslexic, at some point they can just read. They never need to come back. When I teach people golf swing stuff or some other things I do in my life, been doing, more or less, I can't work anymore really. They get to a point where they can do it. I had students do things they was like calling impossible. And I said, if you're doing it and you call it impossible, but that's kind of a weird thing to say, don't you think? Very funny with people. When you teach them something, they just think it's impossible. And then they are doing it. Oh, kind of weird. Ooh. I still remember that guy, he was like 55. I chatted him up on the range. And I said, I walked over to him and said, is it okay I give you some feedback? And he said, yeah. And 20 minutes later, he was flushing his spoon. He was absolutely just flushing it, every fucking swing. Flush, 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 flush. And he was high like a fucking cake. Woo! You don't need drugs. That's all I'm saying. You just need to hit that ball flush. And I met him a month later. He's asking how things were going. And he said, my handicap had dropped. I'm still struggling, yeah, keep doing what I get feedback about, you'll be fine. Because he was absolutely high. And I didn't need to change his swing. All I did was optimize what he already did. So he can always do it. And all it took was 20 minutes. Anyway, people think and believe, but all that comes from memory. What you have here is a contextual memory, that's your reality. When that is in question, usually when I say things and do things, people go like, well, that's impossible. I said, if I just did it, how can it be impossible? And they kind of look at you and go, they don't know, because their head is telling them it must be wrong, it must be impossible. I ask people the kind of simplest question. I ask them, so who in the world, with the history of the world, invented the radio technology? When you listen to a radio, who invented that? And it was Nikola Tesla, right? That's what you're thinking about. When you went to school, people were teaching some other guy was inventing the radio. He didn't. He was a thief. He was Italian and a thief and a criminal. But I mean, today they can, people even elect criminals as presidents. I mean, this strange world out there, kind of weird. It wears me out. He's a criminal. Why would you vote for him? Well, he won't fuck me over, right? What are criminals doing again? Aren't it the people who fuck you over? Yeah. So what would be different with a criminal president then? Think about it. So Nikola Tesla invented the radio, and most people, when they go to school, they will teach you that someone else did that, right? And they'd be wrong. And if you ask people how much is 5 times 5, and most people will just pop out 25. The interesting thing here, you didn't calculate it. You didn't go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 5, 5, 10, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You didn't do that. You didn't need to calculate. You just go memory, boom. Math is very easy when you can do that shit. This is what people who are really good at math do. They just take the information, you tell them what is 55 out of 10 quadruple with some number, and they go 257. And you look at them, how the fuck did they do that? Because the memory has built-in calculated models already. Ask any writer. When you write books, yeah, do you have some idea of the people in the book, what they say and how they're gonna say it, all this stuff? Of course they have. They build a world inside their heads. Some even do it so much. There was that guy who wrote the book Shogun, the Japanese, 1600s and all that stuff. And Japanese historians asked him, did you do a lot of research, about, Japanese history, because you're really accurate. And he said, no, I live there. So when he was writing the books, he was in the 1600s, 500 years back in time, living in a village when that guy came from Europe, and the shoguns and, all feudal and all stuff. He was there, then he wrote it down. It's all in their heads. I talk to people who, draw cartoons and, paint all that stuff. They see the things, the world differently because they can see things in distinction of in the painting. And here's an interesting experiment you can do for yourself. If you have a museum nearby, go there one day when you have a lot of time and nothing to do, which is usually every day, and pick a painting that you like, an old painting, I don't know, if you live in Paris, maybe you go see Mona Lisa, and just sit there and watch that painting for an hour. Do nothing else, just go there and watch the painting for an hour. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to start seeing things, details in that painting you've never seen before. But you have to stay there for an hour or 45 minutes. Most people will never do that. But if you do it, you can get an insight in that contextual memory created by skills of comparison, of distinction, of difference, and that is the magic of human consciousness, reality, and perception. I'm going to write a book about this shit because I know people like books. I'm going to write a book, and then people, 5,000 years from now, going to, this guy, this book is really, really good because it's brand new psychology that actually fucking works. No talent needed, just a bunch of skills. Go watch that painting. Have fun.